In the ancient city of Mecca, nestled between sun-scorched mountains and the endless sands of the Arabian desert, a child came into the world whose early years would be shaped by profound sorrow and quiet resilience. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, and even before he took his first breath, destiny had set him upon a path marked by loss, compassion, and an unwavering faith that would later move nations. It was the year of the elephant, a year forever etched in the memory of Arabia, when a mighty army led by Abraha had advanced toward Mecca, intent on destroying the sacred sanctuary, the Kaaba. The city trembled with fear, but against all odds, the army was defeated, not by the swords of men but by forces unseen, as birds carrying small stones sent the invaders fleeing. Amidst the awe and relief that swept Mecca after this miracle, a child was born to Amina bint Wahb. Yet this child's birth was not wrapped in the ordinary joy of welcoming a newborn, for even before he could open his eyes, his father, Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib, had died during a trading journey far from home in Yathrib, never to return. The boy entered life an orphan from his very first day, a tender soul without the strong embrace of a father to guide him. But in place of what was lost, Allah's plan set gentle hearts round him. His mother Amina, graceful and soft-spoken, loved him dearly, and his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, chief of the Quraysh and guardian of the Kaaba, took him close to his heart. There was something in the child's presence that touched those around him, and innocence mingled with quiet dignity even in infancy, as if the winds of the desert whispered secrets of the destiny yet to unfold. In those days, it was the noble custom of Mecca's families to send newborns to be nursed among the Bedouins in the desert. It was believed that the open air, far from the dust and illness of the city, would help a child grow strong and healthy, and the Bedouins' eloquent tongue would give the child purity of speech. And so, when the women of the Banu Sa'd tribe came to Mecca seeking children to nurse, one woman named Halima Saadia found her heart drawn to this orphan boy. At first, Halima hesitated. An orphan would bring no gift or payment, and she herself was already burdened with poverty. But an unseen force stirred compassion within her heart, and she chose to take him home. From the very moment she embraced the boy, blessings seemed to pour upon her household. Her weak she-camel, which had barely given milk, now nursed abundantly. The animals became healthier, her pastures greener, and what little they had began to stretch further than before. Halima and her family felt that this child brought with him a barakah that touched every corner of their lives. In the wide valleys and under the boundless skies, Muhammad, peace be upon him, spent his first years among the Bedouins. He learned the rhythm of life guided by the sun and stars, felt the sting of desert winds, and listened to stories by the fire. He grew sturdy and graceful, with eyes full of curiosity and a gentle nature that endeared him to all who knew him. After about 4 years, as was the custom, Halima brought the child back to Mecca to return him to his mother. Yet Halima and her family had grown deeply attached, and seeing signs of blessing around him, she requested to keep him a while longer. Amina agreed, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, stayed in the desert for a short time more before finally returning home to his mother's loving embrace. But life, so often tender in moments, can turn swiftly. When Muhammad was around 6 years old, Amina decided to take him on a journey north to Yathrib, the city of his father's family. It was a chance to visit the grave of Abdullah, and to show her son the family he never met. Together, mother and child traveled through the valleys, accompanied by Ayman, a faithful servant, in Yathrib. For a brief moment, Muhammad, peace be upon him, felt the warmth of extended family, the stories of his father, and perhaps a fragile glimpse of the life that might have been. Yet on their way home, fate's hand fell heavy once more. Amina became ill on the journey back, and in the lonely place of Al-Abwa, far from her own kin, she returned her soul to Allah. Muhammad, peace be upon him, now only 6 years old, stood beside his mother's grave, the weight of orphanhood pressing upon his young heart more than any child should bear. Alone in the vast world, without the comfort of a father he never knew, and now bereft of his mother's tender embrace, he must have felt sorrow as deep as the desert night. Yet Allah did not leave him without care. Ayman gathered him and brought him back to Mecca, where his grandfather Abdul Muttalib received him with open arms. Abdul Muttalib was by then an elder of great respect, custodian of the Kaaba and leader of the Quraysh. Though his years were many, he cherished the boy deeply, sensing that this child held a destiny beyond their understanding. In the shade of the Kaaba, where the elders of Quraysh would gather, Abdul Muttalib would seat young Muhammad, peace be upon him, beside him, a place of honor. No other child was granted. This special affection eased some of the boy's sorrow. The love of his grandfather gave him a sense of belonging, of safety in a city that could be harsh to the weak and fatherless. Yet even this comfort was not to last. When Muhammad was 8 years old, Abdul Muttalib passed away, leaving yet another wound on the heart of the orphaned boy. After Abdul Muttalib's death, the guardianship of Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed to his paternal uncle, Abu Talib. Though Abu Talib was not wealthy, his love for his nephew was deep and unwavering. He raised Muhammad alongside his own children, showing no difference in affection. The young boy grew up among cousins, learning the ways of the Quraysh, the craft of trade, and the traditions of his people. In these years, though life was simple and often marked by hardship, Muhammad, peace be upon him, noble character began to shine. Even as a boy, he displayed truthfulness, patience, and kindness. He would share his food with those who had none, help the weak, and never uttered a lie. His honesty earned him the titles Al-Amin, the trustworthy, and As-Sadiq, the truthful, names that would follow him all his life. To help his uncle, Muhammad, peace be upon him, worked as a shepherd, guiding flocks over the rocky hills outside Mecca. It was humble work, but it taught him patience, reflection, and responsibility. Many prophets before him had been shepherds, learning to care for the weak and protect the flock from harm. Lessons that would one day echo in how he guided a nation. As he grew into youth, he sometimes traveled with Abu Talib on trading journeys beyond Mecca. On these caravans, he observed the ways of merchants, the honesty that built trust, and the greed that destroyed it. Even in bustling markets filled with haggling voices and clinking coins, Muhammad's integrity set him apart. Buyers and sellers alike trusted his word more than contracts. Though an orphan, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was never left without. Loved his heart, softened by loss, became rich with compassion. He knew the pain of loneliness, so he showed gentleness to the lonely. He knew the ache of vulnerability, so he protected the weak. The Quran would later remind him and all believers, "Did he not find you an orphan and give you refuge?" Quran 93-6. His own story became a testament that hardship can be the soil where mercy, strength, and faith take root. Years passed, and as he entered adulthood, his reputation for honesty reached the ears of Khadija bint Khuwaylid, a noble and wealthy widow of Quraysh. Impressed by reports of his character, she hired Muhammad, peace be upon him, to lead her caravan to Syria. Under his guidance, the trade journey proved more successful than any she had known. Upon his return, those who accompanied him spoke of his fairness, kindness, and wisdom. Moved by what she heard, Khadija proposed marriage. Though she was older than Muhammad, he accepted, and thus began a partnership built not on wealth or power but on respect, trust, and shared virtue. In Khadija, Muhammad, peace be upon him, found a steadfast companion, a source of comfort whose love eased the scars of his childhood sorrows. Yet even with marriage and the responsibilities of trade, Muhammad, peace be upon him, never forgot the plight of orphans and the poor. His home became a refuge for the needy, his words a balm for the broken-hearted. It was as though the pain he had carried as a child opened his heart wider to the struggles of others. As the years passed and revelation neared, these early wounds, losses, and moments of tenderness had forged a man of remarkable character. Muhammad, peace be upon him, had walked through the valleys of sorrow, yet emerged with gentleness. He had tasted loneliness, yet became the friend of the forgotten. He had known the insecurity of an orphan, yet grew into the guide of humanity. His life reminds the world that being an orphan does not mean being without worth, that loss, though heavy, can deepen compassion, and that hearts broken by hardship can shine with mercy that touches countless others. And so, from the silent tears beside his mother's grave at Al-Abwa to the honored seat beside his grandfather at the Kaaba, from shepherding sheep outside Mecca to guiding caravans across distant lands, Muhammad, peace be upon him, early life was a story of sorrow met with patience, of hardship answered with grace. It was the quiet preparation of a heart destined to carry the weightiest message ever revealed. Though orphaned, he was never alone, for in every loss, there was a lesson, in every sorrow, a seed of mercy, and in every trial, a sign that Allah was shaping the beloved of mankind, the prophet of mercy, Muhammad, peace be upon him. Through the winding alleys of Mecca, where traders called out prices and pilgrims moved with quiet reverence around the Kaaba, the young Muhammad, peace be upon him, grew into a man whose presence spoke louder than words. Even those who barely knew him felt the weight of his sincerity. His steps were measured, his voice soft yet clear, and his gaze steady, free from arrogance or deceit. He laughed, but never in excess. He spoke, but never without thought. Too many. It seemed as though the silence of lonely childhood had taught him to listen more deeply to people, to the world, and to the stillness within. At home, his kindness was not a show for the market or the gatherings of Quraysh elders. It was woven into his daily life, offering help to the needy, greeting the poor and the wealthy alike with the same respect, and carrying burdens that were not his to carry. He knew what it meant to have no one, and so he chose to be someone for others. Even in the years when he had little, Muhammad, peace be upon him, shared what he could. If he had only a few dates, he would give away part of them. If someone wronged him, he would forgive quietly rather than seek revenge. This mercy was not born of weakness but from strength, the strength that comes when a heart has endured sorrow and survived. Those who knew him in these years came to see that his compassion was matched by truthfulness. In a city where words could be twisted for gain, his words stood straight. Merchants trusted him with their goods and their secrets. Neighbors trusted him with disputes and debts. Even the chieftains of rival clans, who disagreed on many things, found agreement in one, that Muhammad was trustworthy beyond measure. Yet the wounds of orphanhood never fully left him. At times, in quiet moments by the Kaaba, he would watch the pilgrims and the poor, and his heart would soften, especially for the orphans wandering Mecca streets. It was as though he saw himself in their eyes, the small boy who had once stood beside a mother's grave far from home, or beside a grandfather's deathbed, too young to carry the weight of so much loss. In his private prayers, long before revelation came, he would reflect on these memories that did not harden his heart. Instead, they made it a vessel wide enough to carry the grief of others, and deep enough to hold mercy for all creation. As he matured, these qualities drew the attention of Khadija bint Khuwaylid, whose life, though blessed with wealth, had also known its share of sorrow and challenge. When she offered marriage, it was not because of gold or lineage, but because in him she saw a character like no other, a man of truth, patience, and quiet dignity. Their marriage was one of shared respect and gentle affection. Though the streets of Mecca still whispered with rivalry and pride, their home was a place of peace. Khadija's trust in Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave him space to reflect, to retreat into the stillness of the mountains where the city's noise could not follow. At night, under skies filled with silent stars, he would remember his mother Amina, the softness of her voice now only a memory. He would remember his grandfather's hand resting gently on his shoulder, and Abu Talib's tireless support. These memories were not chains binding him to the past, but roots that nourished the compassion and patience that would later define him. When he walked the streets of Mecca, he greeted the slave and the master alike, saw the widow and the orphan, the merchant and the beggar, not with the cold eyes of custom, but as souls equal before Allah. This view did not come from wealth, for he had little, nor from privilege, for he had none. It came from having stood on the edge of loss so many times, that he understood what it meant to be unseen. As the years passed, Mecca grew busier. Caravans from Yemen and Syria filled its markets. Poets sang of tribal glory. Idols crowded the sanctuary of the Kaaba. Yet in the heart of Muhammad, there remained a quiet question, a longing that could not be answered by gold or poetry or the voices of men. In the stillness of Hira, a cave in the surrounding mountains, he sought solitude, searching for a truth older than stone and deeper than tradition. He would stay for nights, wrapped in a simple cloak against the cold winds. In those silent hours, the memories of being an orphan must have returned to him. The first night without his mother, the days when grief felt too large for a child's chest, the silent prayers whispered into darkness when there was no one else to hear. Yet in that loneliness, he had always found Allah long before the first words of revelation descended. These moments were not preparation alone but healing, the quiet mending of a heart that had been broken by loss so that it might carry revelation for all of humanity. When at last the angel came to him in Hira, and the first words of the Quran were revealed, "Read in the name of your Lord," it was not the beginning of his character, but the blossoming of seeds sown long ago in the soil of orphanhood and sorrow. As a prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, never forgot the pain of being an orphan. In his teachings, care for orphans became a central virtue. He taught that the one who cares for an orphan would be as close to him in paradise as to joined fingers. He warned against oppressing the weak, and he praised those who sheltered the needy. In Medina, when he led a community, he did not build a palace for himself. His home was simple, his possessions few. His door remained open to the poor, the traveler, the outcast, because he knew what it meant to have no door to knock on. When he distributed charity, He favored orphans, remembering himself among them. And when wealth came to the Muslim community, he still chose to live simply, never forgetting the days when he had nothing, even in moments of triumph, such as the peaceful conquest of Mecca. His humility remained. The same boy who once stood, weeping beside his mother's grave, now entered his hometown not with pride, but with his head bowed in gratitude. When the people who had mocked and harmed him stood before him powerless, he chose mercy over vengeance, forgiveness over punishment. The man who had begun life as an orphan now became a refuge for all those without refuge. At night, in prayer, tears would sometimes fall upon his blessed face, and he would pray for his people, those who followed him and those who rejected him alike. His heart, widened by sorrow and shaped by mercy, could not hold hatred, even for those who wronged him most. He wished only guidance. The Quran spoke to his memories. Did he not find you an orphan and give you refuge? And he found you lost and guided you. And he found you poor and made you self-sufficient. These verses were not only reminders of divine favor, but a call to compassion. Because he knew the pain of being alone, he taught his followers never to leave others alone. Because he had been poor, he taught generosity. Because he had been an orphan, he became the father of the fatherless. When people asked about the best deeds, he often mentioned caring for widows and orphans, softening the hearts of the strong and dignifying the weak. His life showed that greatness does not come from wealth or power, but from mercy, patience, and truthfulness. Toward the end of his life, though he led armies and guided a nation, Muhammad still lived simply. His bed was of palm fibers. His lamp sometimes went out from lack of oil. His daughters would visit him, and he would stand to greet them, seating them beside him with tenderness. His household remained a place of humility, where laughter was gentle, and kindness flowed freely. His final sermon, delivered on the plain of Arafat, echoed the lessons of his orphanhood: respect for life, equality before God, and mercy for the weak. As he spoke, his voice carried across thousands, but the words came from a heart that had once been shaped by loneliness, pain, and trust in Allah alone. And when his final illness came, he rested his blessed head on the lap of his beloved wife, Aisha. Even in pain, he remembered his people, praying for their guidance and forgiveness. He left this world not with treasures, but with a message that still heals hearts, that in mercy there is strength, in patience victory, and that the most beloved to God are those who care for the weak and the orphaned. Muhammad, peace be upon him, began life an orphan, carrying wounds that would have broken many. Yet these wounds became the source of his tenderness. His solitude became his closeness to Allah. His grief became his empathy for all creation. His story is not merely a tale of loss, but of a heart transformed by sorrow into a light for humanity. And so, centuries later, across deserts, mountains, and oceans, his name is spoken with love by millions who never saw his face, but who feel the warmth of his mercy, a mercy born, in part, from the silent tears of a little boy beside his mother's grave. His life teaches us that no loss is wasted, that the deepest wounds can become doors to grace, and that being an orphan is not the end of hope, but sometimes the very beginning of greatness. And so, as the years turned and the boy who had once been left alone at Al-Abwa became the beloved prophet of mercy, the story of Muhammad, peace be upon him, as an orphan stands not as a tale of tragedy alone, but as a living testament to the hidden wisdom of hardship. For every loss that might have broken him instead became a lesson that shaped him. The absence of a father taught him self-reliance and trust in God. The death of a mother taught him the depth of grief and the priceless value of kindness. The passing of a grandfather taught him that leadership is a trust, not a privilege. And, in the protective arms of an uncle who had little but gave so much, he learned that true wealth lies not in what the hand holds, but in what the heart gives. Through each season of sorrow, his character blossomed rather than withered. His heart, instead of becoming bitter, grew softer, able to hold the pain of others, to listen before speaking, to forgive rather than condemn. In this, there was a message for all who would follow him, that no wound, however deep, is beyond healing, that no hardship, however heavy, is without purpose, and that what seems like an end may, by Allah's will, become the beginning of something greater. When revelation finally descended upon him in the quiet solitude of the cave of Hira, it did not come to a man hardened by bitterness, but to one who had carried loss with dignity, who had spent a lifetime caring for the unseen and unheard. The words he received were entrusted to a heart that had been humbled and strengthened by sorrow, and so, his message was not only of faith, but of compassion, justice, and mercy. Throughout his life as a prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, never forgot the shadow of orphanhood. His home was open to the poor, his hands quick to help those in need, his tongue gentle with those who had none to defend them. He reminded his followers again and again of the rights of orphans, of the virtue of feeding the hungry and comforting the lonely. The memory of his own childhood sorrow became a fountain of mercy that flowed outward, touching all who came near. In the last days of his life, when the burden of illness weighed upon him, he did not speak of regret for lost wealth or missed opportunities. His concerns were for his people, that they remain united, just, and kind. Even as his strength waned, his love did not. His final prayer was a prayer of mercy, his final wish, that the message of compassion and faith might remain alive in the hearts of his followers. He departed this world in the simplest of rooms, on a humble bed, with the love of his family around him and the remembrance of Allah on his lips. He left behind not gold nor palaces, but a legacy of character that still inspires hearts more than 14 centuries later. And so the story comes full circle, from the child who stood alone beside his mother's grave at Al-Abwa, to the prophet who became a mercy to all worlds. His life as an orphan was not a footnote in his story, but the very soil in which his compassion, patience, and strength took root, for those who today feel alone, forgotten, or wounded by loss. His story stands as a living hope, that even the deepest pain can become a source of kindness, that even when the world turns away, Allah remains, and that greatness is not in what we own, but in what we give. Long after the sands of Mecca have shifted and centuries have passed, the echo of His mercy remains, in every hand that feeds an orphan, in every heart that forgives, in every tongue that speaks the truth with gentleness. His life shows us that sorrow can become strength, loneliness can become love, and that the orphan child of Mecca could rise, by Allah's will, to become the beloved guide of humanity. And so his story ends, yet never truly ends, for every time his name is spoken with love, every time his example is followed, his legacy continues, a legacy that began, against all odds, in the quiet heart of an orphan boy, chosen by Allah to bring light to a world in need. Peace and blessings be upon him, the orphan who became a prophet, the prophet who became a mercy to the worlds.